Welcome to Inside Independent Publishing with IBPA. I'm your host, Christopher Locke. I'm also the IBPA Director of Membership and Member Services. We have a very quick announcement coming up on May 4th through 6th is IBPA Publishing University. We're very excited about it. It's a great conference for independent publishers and author publishers. And because we love that you listen to this podcast, we are giving a 15% discount code. So listen to the podcast somewhere during the interview. You're going to see a code come up. Use that. Go to publishinguniversity.org and learn all about the conference. Okay, so here we go for this day's episode. There are thousands and thousands of schools in the U.S., so getting your books into the education market can be quite lucrative and rewarding. Although the thing is that, how do you do it? How do you get into schools? What kinds of books are marketable to schools? How do you set up school author visits? We have author, educator, and speaker Jane Wood today on the show, and you're going to answer all those questions and more. Hello, Jane.
Hi, I'm going to do that in 30 minutes.
That you're going to change everyone's life in 30 minutes. I thought that was the plan. Yeah.
All right. The gauntlet has been thrown down. Pick it up. Let's go.
And the other thing about being rewarding, I did want to mention, of course, you're also getting your books into schools to inspire the next generation of readers. So that's part of the fun. Okay. So here's probably like the first and one of the more important things is what kinds of books are marketable to schools?
That's a great question. And most people think we're just talking about children's picture books or chapter books or maybe YA books for middle school. But think about any kind of book, nonfiction book of history, historical fiction, science. There's books out there about math. So many different subject areas. And it's not just the math, science, English, social studies. When you start talking about what's going on in schools and the curriculum, you get into weather, you get into space, you get into health, PE, drama, art. So if you've got a book that touches on any of those areas or a character that really delves into one of those subject areas, it's very appropriate for school, as long as it is appropriate. And by that, we're talking about it can't have any explicit sexual content, any really foul language. Even excessive violence isn't good. But really, the spectrum is quite broad of genres that can be of interest to schools.
So are there, themes or topics like friendship, maybe genres, fantasy, adventure that tend to do better? Or are you really just saying just kind of anything?
Well, I can tell you with the younger kids in the middle school and elementary, it's fiction. They really like the fiction. I was in a school yesterday, as a matter of fact, and 3 of the kids were sitting there with Harry Potter books. And so that's what's very popular for them right now. My books are fiction, and I have a series, which is a great thing to do because you sell one book or you read one book in the class and then the kids want to buy the other 4. And so that's been very successful for me. But to be honest, even the nonfiction is becoming more and more popular, especially if it's relates to a STEM or a STEAM. STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math, which is a part of all the school's curriculum. And if you do STEAM, that includes the arts, STEAM. And they're very popular. So you've just got to get creative and think about what is the content, the subject area of your book, and where would it match to a classroom?
Okay, so then what specifically makes books attractive to educators? Is it certain lessons being taught or?
It is. The book really needs to have some educational value if you're going to truly market it to schools. And by that, I mean making it compatible with the curriculum. Find out what the schools are teaching in whatever district or state that you're targeting, and that's how you address your marketing in that vein. For example, in many states, 5th grade studies the American Revolution. It's usually studied also at 8th grade and then again in high school, depending on the subjects. High school, you get into very specific areas. It might be world history. It might be American history. And so you just need to discover where your book fits into the curriculum. And the next question is obviously, well, how do I know what that is? You go to the state that you're targeting and go to their DOE, Department of Education website. And most of them, everyone I've ever been to, lists the standards. So you're looking at the standards. Sometimes they'll call it standards. Sometimes they'll call it curriculum, accountability, anything like that. You got to sometimes dig in a little, but you'll eventually get to a page that tells you what subjects are studied at what grade levels. Then you know who you're targeting, what your audience is. And remember, you've got two audiences. You've got the students, the ones you're really trying to reach, the ones that are going to read it, but you've got the teachers, the educators, the media specialists. So that's one of the tools you put into your toolkit when you're going to market to schools. Figure out where your book fits into their curriculum, and then that's who you're going to contact to try to sell your books.
Okay. And then you mentioned about specifically at the school, who are you reaching out to, and then how do you reach out to them? Do you find their email address online, or how do you do that?
Specifically, I usually reach out to the media specialist, especially at elementary or middle school level. The bad news is there's a lot of schools that don't have media specialists anymore, or librarians, which just makes me sick, but that's the reality. And if they've got a media specialist there, they're usually the ones that will coordinate an author visit or buy a purchase of books for the library. Now, some media specialists or even teachers or administrators or literacy coaches will want to buy a classroom set of the books, which is ideal. And frequently, depending on the school's budget, they'll buy a classroom set of books, and Mrs. Jones' class will read it, and then Mrs. Smith's class will read it, and they pass it on around a particular grade level. Sometimes they'll buy just a few copies for the library. And then sometimes you'll get a school that will give you a large bulk order. But you've got to initially contact the media specialist. If you're going to a high school, you might want to contact the creative writing teacher or the head of a particular department. If it's going to relate to history, there'll be a head of the history department, a head of the English department, head of the science department. Even at elementary schools, frequently there is a department chair for fourth grade, a department chair for fifth grade. You can find this information usually on a website. And then what I always do, and I strongly suggest you make your pitch very succinct, very short. I do a very short email because they just don't have the time. They don't want a long conversation with you on the phone. You can certainly send them your flyer or your sell sheet with a cover letter. That works too. But why not send it with email and just put attachments to it? And they will get to it at their leisure or when it's convenient for them. I mean, it's really hard to talk to a teacher or a media specialist during the school day. After 3 o'clock, maybe, but frequently they want to get out of there. So you want to give it to them in a format that they can open it when it's good for them. And like I said, I keep it very succinct. My name is Jane Wood. I'm an author. I've got a series of chapter books where I weave history and science into stories, fun fiction stories for students ages 8 to 12. That was one sentence, 2 sentences, I guess. But they know who I am, what I've got, and then I have maybe 2 more sentences saying, I'd be interested in talking to you about my books. Is there a good time we can talk? Or can I send you a preview copy of one of my books? Or I'd like to schedule an author visit. Just keep it very short, and then obviously give your contact information, your email address, and your phone number. And you'd be surprised how many responses you can get. There'll be a lot that you won't get. They aren't interested or they don't have the budget, but you'd be surprised. Sometimes you'll get a response, oh, we were looking for an author. Now, I will suggest that if you're going to really send a lot of emails out, do it at the very beginning of the school year. In fact, before the school year begins, sometimes in August, because they get a budget, but they spend their budget quickly. And they're going to plan ahead. And if they've only got so much money they can spend on on books or on author visits, then they're going to commit to that early in the school year.
Yeah. And one question about reaching out. So is the publisher reaching out on behalf of the author, or are the authors expected to reach out? Whose job is it, if you will?
Mostly it's going to fall on the shoulders of the author. If the publisher is going to do it, that's great. And you have to give them some ammunition to help them market it for you or make that outreach. But I have found mostly, even I have many author friends who deal with publishers, and they say they have to schedule their own author visits. Now, a publisher can be very helpful in providing some good print materials that, with graphics on it, and it's well designed so that that can be sent as an attachment. Every author ought to have, we call them sell sheets when you're talking to libraries and you're talking to bookstores. And with schools, I just refer to it as a flyer, because that's, a little bit more on the education side. Instead, a sell sheet sounds like you're really trying to get aggressive and market to them or sell to them. And that's probably just not the best way to put it. So I call it my 5-book flyer. And then I have a flyer that's a school discount order form. I do offer discounts. And when you're working with a publisher, sometimes that's awkward because they aren't willing to offer multiple prices. Some do and some don't. Frequently, the authors that work with the publisher that want to do a discount to a school have to buy so many copies of the book themselves, and then they offer the discount. And that gets a little tedious and awkward. But having those materials, a publisher can help an author with that. Maybe even do a book trailer. Anything that would help to market the book to the education audience, which probably works for any audience if they're doing a book trailer, but specifically for schools, can be very helpful.
So do schools, in some way expect there to be a discount? Like whatever the price of the book is, they expect if you reach out to them that you're like, and don't worry, you're going to get this special, whatever, 20% or whatever it is.
Yes, and it's done in a variety of ways. I just do a standard discount for schools and to students. Some authors will charge their full retail price, particularly if they have a publisher and that's all they can do. But then they'll say, we'll donate a set of books. Maybe it's 6 books, maybe it's 10 books to the school library or to the classrooms. Maybe you're targeting 5th grade and there's 8 5th grade teachers, or there's 4 5th grade teachers, and you donate 4 books. And that's another way that it can be done. Sometimes schools will want to sell the book at the full retail price. I mean, you give it to them and then you give them a discount. And so they make $2 or $3 on every book that's sold, and they use that as a fundraiser for the PTA. So there's just all kinds of ways of doing it. I always say everything's negotiable. Work with the school, find out what they can do. I charge a fee when I speak at schools, and I've had schools tell me sometimes, well, we don't have that much money, but could you do it for this? Frequently, they have a separate budget for purchasing books and a separate budget or a line item for doing author visits or presentations. So sometimes you can say, well, I'll do it for this amount. Can you buy 10 books? Can you buy 20 books? It's a business. And you've just got to be flexible and be willing to work with them and work within their budget.
Yeah. And so, because I was going to ask you about distribution, but it sounds like, because normally libraries or booksellers buy it through whatever, Ingram or something. But it sounds like the schools are buying the books directly from you, the author or the publisher, or do they also get it from Ingram?
All of the above. It just depends. Now, I self-publish my books. And I keep inventory here, and that's why I'm able to sell them to schools at the discount, whatever amount they want. I can do it through Ingram, print on demand. I have some that I've done with offset printing. That's where I have my bulk orders, and that's where I make the most money. But I do know schools, if there's a school that wants to order a large number of books and your books are listed with Ingram or Lightning Source, you can have them drop shipped to the school. Now, the problem with that is most of the schools and the kids want the books autographed. So then you need to get there early or go by if it's local and sign all those books. I always sign all my books and personalize them to each student. But I do that because I'm distributing them myself. And what I do is send out a student discount order form about 10 days before I'm going to do a school visit. And they will send me back a list of the kids that ordered the books, which books and what their name is. And I will pre-sign all of them and bring them with me the day of the presentation. Or if they all want to bring their money and their checks the day of my presentation, I go there a couple hours early or an hour early, depending on how many books there are, stay a couple hours late and sign them there. That's one of the advantages of them buying a book from you directly. They get it autographed. They're not going to get that if they order it from Amazon. And there are some schools that just say, we're going to send out your information and let the parents order them from Amazon, particularly if they have free shipping, because that's what the parents want to do.
Yeah. And I wanted to go back to that flyer you mentioned. So, a lot of times you're talking about like it being a sell sheet. So I'm just interested in how it differs from that to the education market. I mean, I guess, are you creating, and thanks for people watching, Jane's being nice enough to hold it up for people listening. What are you going to do? Because you'll never see it. So I'm wondering if the text is then making it a little more clear, like how it's good for kids, right? Or whatever your age group is.
Exactly. And because my books are I call it fun fiction, but I weave some history and science into it. I choose settings that are historic places. So that's how I weave the history and keep it very succinct, because the kids want a page turner. They want to find out what happens next. If I put too much history in there, I lose my audience. And so I will put my little blurbs about each of my books. I try to make it interesting for kids, even though it might be a parent or a grandparent or a teacher or whomever is going to be buying the book. They're buying it for a specific child, and they want to know what is intriguing about this, that this child would want to read this book. So I have my flyer, and I really tweak it towards making it interesting for kids, because that's my audience.
Okay. Well, so one thing I wanted to ask about is there's a lot of books out there already, like Dr. Seuss, Harry Potter, you mentioned earlier. These are quote unquote classics. And, you've got all these new books coming out. How do you compete or compare to something that for years has been considered one of the, the greatest stories of all time? How do you get your book to go, hey, but mine's also a good book for kids?
Well, like I said, if it's compatible with something the teachers are having to teach already, that's going to make it attractive to them, because it's not just the standard textbook, which they're probably using already, or many of them aren't even doing textbooks anymore. They're doing everything online with tablets and iPads. They want something the kids can relate to, that makes that subject come alive for them. I've had many teachers tell me, one of my books takes place in St. Augustine, Florida. I live in Florida. A lot of schools, fourth grade in particular, they go to St. Augustine for their fourth grade field trip. And I've had teachers tell me, we've talked about St. Augustine every year, but when we read your book, all of a sudden the kids found it more interesting, even though they were relating to a fictional character. That's where Joey heard the voices for the first time. That's where Bobby bought the chocolate alligator from the chocolate store. Kids relate to it much better than straight out of a history textbook or a history lesson. So you've got to keep your audience in mind. Whatever you think the kids are going to be interested in, that's what the teachers are trying to do, make it more interesting. And I've had that work to my advantage many, many times. I could tell many stories about how parents, grandparents, teachers have said, we visited XYZ place because my kids read it in your book and they wanted to go see it for themselves. So those are the kinds of things, making it relevant. Yes, the classics are great, but they're looking for something new and exciting and something that the kids will relate to, maybe a little bit better than they would relate to a classic.
Yeah, well, I'm going to set like a children's book in like a park, make it very generic, because all kids go to parks. And then all the teachers will be like, well, we got to read the kids the park book, right? See?
and make it a series.
Yeah, I'll do 12. I'm doing 12 of them.
Series are the way to go.
Okay. You've mentioned author visits, so I'd like to chat with you about that. It sounds like a great way to get exposure. What's that process like? You're already reaching out to them about buying the book, but I guess is that part of that whole process? You say also, I'd love to come to the school and talk about the book.
Exactly. I reach out and basically I tell them just a little bit about the book. Actually, if I've attached the flyer, I don't have to go into a lot of detail. But the next thing I do is I pitch doing an author visit. I say, I'd love to come do an author visit to your school. Once you've scheduled an author visit, then you go to the next step and say, I would like to offer my books at a discount to your students. The books will be signed by the author. They'll be personalized to the student, and I'll be glad to send you a student discount order form. I sell most of my books to students. Schools will buy books, but the students, because I have a series of 5, and then I have an additional chapter book. But the kids will read one of the books in the class with the teacher, and then they want to buy the other 4 because just like everybody, you want to find out what happens next. We all have favorite authors, and every time a new book comes out, we want to get their newest book. So that's how it works. I've been very fortunate, and most of the time I will sell between 30 to 50 books at a school visit, depending on how many classes were involved. I just did a school visit where I sold 97 books. Another one last 2 weeks ago, I sold 65 books. And then one year I was very, very lucky. A whole school district, a very large school district, selected one of my books for every 4th grader in the district to read it. I got a purchase order for 6,400 copies of that book. I mean, it was phenomenal. I bought a new car that year because there's a purchase order. But the reason they bought it, that book had been published in 2004, and I got the purchase order in 2014, which is 10 years later, because so many teachers in the district had used that book for 10 years. When the superintendent said, I want our kids learning history through fiction, they all said, we want Jane's book for 4th grade. Now, that was just, that was pure luck. Well, maybe not all luck. They liked my book, but just so happened they were making large purchases, and there was my book sitting there. But most of the time you schedule the author visit, and then the book orders will follow after that.
Okay. Yeah. And congrats on that, by the way. That's amazing. So then for the author visit, you're doing a presentation. Okay. So I'm sure you're reading from the book, but what is the presentation? Are you talking about, if your themes of your book are about friendship or history, are you talking about that? What are you doing in the presentation?
With my particular books, I always have a PowerPoint presentation of the historic places that are featured in my books, because my characters they're in historic cities, and my characters visit some of the places. Sometimes it's a museum, sometimes it's the Paul Revere House or the Old North Church. So I include photos of that because I want kids to say, I want to go there someday. I want to see that. That's part of the teacher in me. I want them to go. But kids are also visual learners. So it's great to have a PowerPoint, not just bullets and, something you do for a conference or something. You want it to be visual. Maybe you bring props. Maybe you have some kind of prop that would be interested. If it's an illustrator speaking to a school, you want to be drawing in front of them. I know authors that do a song, they sing. I would never do that. They wouldn't like it. But you use what works best for you, and keeping the kids in mind. You want to get the kids engaged and excited. I also talk about the writing process. I talk a little bit about me and how I became an author, but I focus on the writing process, and I emphasize revising and rewriting. Sometimes I'll even take in one of my first manuscripts that has red marks all over it where the editor had changed things around. Teachers love that when you talk about that, because that's what they're telling the kids. You've got to revise and rewrite. So remember, you've got 2 audiences you're speaking to, the kids, but the teachers are in the back of the room. And I can tell you, most of my school visits now are repeat school visits. And it's very unique because every year they get a whole new crop of 4th graders or 5th graders or 10th graders. So you can do the same presentation over and over again. And if the teacher likes it, they're going to schedule you again and again.
So you should find out what their favorite cookies are, or something to be like, oh, remember I brought those cookies.
Yeah.
Okay, good to know. So it sounds like we're talking also, it seems like local schools seem to be a really good thing to target because you can physically go there. Is it hard to get your books into, like, if you live in Florida, to get your books into like Washington State or something, or how does that work?
I've had pretty good luck with that. My husband and I like to travel. So after we've scheduled a trip, then I will go to websites at that particular area, to that school district or surrounding school districts. I'll send out my email saying, my name's Jane Wood. I'm an author, blah, blah, blah. I have these books. I'm going to be visiting in your area on these dates. I'd be interested in scheduling a school visit. You can contact me I give a little bit more information, usually if it's somebody that doesn't know me at all. And I've been very successful. I've spoken to schools in California, Colorado, Minnesota, Tennessee, Virginia, Georgia, South Carolina. Frequently, it's what do they say? A prophet in his own land isn't always recognized. Mm-hmm. Sometimes as a local author, they want somebody to come from someplace else. Not that that person's any better, but when I contact them and they know I'm from Florida, that has a little bit of appeal to them. Oh, we're getting an author from Florida and she's going to talk about XYZ. So I've been very successful in contacting other schools. Again, you go to their websites and you try to find the email address of the media specialist. If you can't find an email address, you can pick up the phone and call the school and just say, I would like to have a conversation with your media specialist or your literacy coach or your department chair for history. Could you give me their email address? You're not asking them for anything that is horribly private. They will have a school district email address, and they usually appreciate the fact that you're not trying to be connected by phone. At least that's what I've discovered.
Hello, everyone. I'm cutting into the interview real quick because I have a special surprise for all you podcast listeners out there. IBPA is excited about our upcoming IBPA Publishing University on May 4th through 6th, 2023 in Coronado, California, which is just outside San Diego, California. And we appreciate you listening to this podcast, so we have an exclusive offer for you. You will get 15% off registration. Again, that's 15 off registration for the conference if you go to publishinguniversity.org and use promo code IBPA podcast. Again, that's IBPA podcast. It's all one word. Use it during checkout and you're going to get 15% off. All right. We look forward to seeing you at the conference. Now back to the show.
And you said you're an author publisher. So, because I was concerned that, if they would not want someone who's quote unquote self-published, and like as if there's some stigma to that, but it doesn't sound like that's been an issue for you.
I have never had a problem with that. Because I am local in Florida, and 3 of my books take place in Florida, that is a immediate entree into many, many schools. But I also have a book in Charleston and Savannah and one in Boston. And depending on the curriculum, if they're studying the American Revolution and my characters in the Boston book do go to the Paul Revere House in the Old North Church, that's my hook to get there. But going into other states, every school across the country at some level is studying the American Revolution. One of my books has an environmental theme. All schools, all districts, all different grade levels have books with an environmental theme. Mine happens to have manatees and sea turtles, manatee on the cover and sea turtles in the storyline. And so it was really interesting. I scheduled 2 schools out in Colorado several years ago, and they picked that book that had a manatee on the cover. And I thought, why would a school in Colorado want to learn about manatees? That was exactly what they wanted to learn about. Didn't know anything about manatees and sea turtles. And of course, I weave it into the storyline, which is, again, a fun fiction story. But those kids were so excited to learn about manatees. They got the environmental theme. They got it immediately because the theme of the book is we need to be protecting our environment and the animals that live in it. And so it had a lot to do with clean water. And the kids in Colorado said immediately, oh, we have that same problem here with the bald eagles and the bighorn sheep, and the plastics and everything that I talk about in my presentations. So you just have to get creative, but think like a teacher. What is it that the teacher is trying to accomplish and teach? And they want it to be interesting and exciting. Bringing an author into the classroom is a whole lot more exciting than the teacher standing up there and talking about manatees. Bring somebody in that can make it a little more exciting.
Now, did you wear a manatee costume? That's what I want to know.
No, I did not. I have donned a pirate hat before, or a conquistador hat, but no, I've never. I do have a pirate outfit because one of my books has pirates in it. That's kind of fun.
Yeah, sure. So we've talked about this a bit, but I just want to see if you have any other advice about how publishers can make money selling books to schools. Is there any other tips beyond what you've already talked about?
Well, I can tell you that I make money 3 ways, and it would be the same thing with publishers and self-published authors. I make money by selling books to the schools. Now, that could be a bulk order. It can be books for the library. It can be a classroom set. So you make money by selling books to the schools, and the schools have budgets. I make money with a speaking fee. And of course, that doesn't go to the publisher, but the publisher should be excited about you doing a speaking or an author visit, because that's where you make money selling books to the students. And again, the author is just going to have to work with the publisher, whether they buy the books or they have a certain amount shipped to them, or they have order forms that go out with the kids that they can order them from the publisher. That doesn't sell as many books as if when you go there, you physically have books with you. The order forms get lost. They don't get home. They miss the deadline. There's all kinds of issues. But publishers can certainly get in on the bulk orders and certainly helping the author have copies of the books to sell when they do an author visit. And it's not just about author visits. All schools have events. They have literacy nights. They have book week celebrations. They have PTA meetings. They have a lot of other opportunities where they will invite an author to come either speak at their event or be a vendor, have what we call a table in the back of the room, and you're selling books. And it's great when parents are at the school on a particular evening because they bring their checkbooks and credit cards. Now, I don't take credit cards when I'm selling to students. They either bring cash or a check. But when I'm there in an evening event or a school carnival, usually you can get a vendor table, sometimes for free, sometimes for $25. And it's just, a couple hours of your time sitting there. And you'd be surprised. I sell a lot of books when I go to those evening events at schools. And that is another way that publishers can help the authors with their marketing materials, something that can go home to the parents before the event, or it can go up on the school website, or it can go into the school newsletter. They do one once a month usually. So there's just all kinds of ways that a publisher can help an author sell the books, not just get their foot in the door for an author visit, but actually move product. So I make my money 3 ways. I sell books to the school, I get a speaking fee, and then I sell books to the students. And I've sold as many as 300 books to students at just one author visit.
I know we are getting near the end, but there is one more issue that I think we should talk about. There are a lot of problems with schools right now where they're banning books. And I just wanted to see if you have any tips for other publishers who are dealing with this, maybe ways that you've overcome it or ways that they can overcome it. But it's a real problem, and it's something that, a little scary that we're in this time right now. But maybe there's ways publishers can get kind of through this without getting sucked into all of these terrible politics.
Obviously, I live in Florida, and this has been a big issue here, but I understand there are 17 other states right now that are considering the same thing. And the idea of the bill that passed in our legislature is that every book in every school library and every classroom library has to be reviewed and approved. So there's a process. And what they have now is the media specialist at every school has to do some online training, and then set up a committee, and it can be parents, teachers, principal, media specialists, and they review the books and they approve it. In some schools, they've hit the panic button and they've just taken every book off the shelf or covered them up. In other schools, they're going through and approving them as they can get to them. They're working with the district, which is putting out a district approved. They're just saying, oh, your books are fine. We've used them for years. We're not worried about it. The bottom line is they're looking for anything that's pornographic, that's sexually explicit, that's got a lot of violence. And you're certainly not going to find any of that in You Give a Mouse a Cookie. So a lot of them are just no-brainers. What I would suggest for publishers and authors in any state, find out what the rules are in your state. If it hasn't become law yet, you want to definitely get to schools and get them using your books already so they're familiar with it. So that when the time comes that they have to check off that book has been approved, they're familiar with it. It's probably going to be very different in every state, just like I'm finding it's very different in every district in Florida. But I've done 3 author visits in schools in 2 different districts in Florida recently, since this legislation happened in early January, and it hasn't been a problem at all. Mostly it's the principal stepping in and looking at the book and saying, this is fine, this is okay. There are some caveats too. There are some exceptions. For example, in Florida, scholastic books and scholastic book fairs are exempt from this. I wonder why. Charter schools are exempt from this. It's just the standard public schools. And again, I think we're getting into some politics there, which I stay away from. I say, tell me what the rules are and how do I get my books submitted so they can be reviewed and approved. And then I go from there. And I'm actually using that as a positive marketing tool. My books have been approved. And so schools are anxious to hear that.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I hope publishers can get through this difficult time. And I know librarians are, man, it's tough being a teacher and a librarian right now. They're kind of on the front lines of all this. So my best to them. And thanks for those tips. Okay, well, we're getting near the end here, but I want to make sure that people read your books and learn about your books. So where can people find your books?
Well, I have a website. It's very simple, janewoodbooks.com. And I have my 6 juvenile fiction books there. And then I have my book, Schools, a Niche Market for Authors, which has all of my strategies that I've used for the past 18 years on how to get books into schools. And they're also available on Amazon. But of course, I like when they buy them directly from me. I sign the books and I can personalize them, particularly for kids, if they're ordered through my website.
Awesome. Yeah. And you have a special deal for IBPA members listening to this podcast, right?
I do. My book, Schools, a Niche Market for Authors, I'm doing a discount for IBPA members, and the code is IBPA 10, the number 10. And you just go to my website, janewoodbooks.com. And when you get to the cart and click on that, it'll ask for the code. You put the code in and you'll get it for $10 plus shipping and tax.
Love it. That's great. I really appreciate you have gone to IBPA Publishing University. You've done webinars for IBPA online. I just can't tell you how much I appreciate that you share your knowledge with other publishers. That's one thing I really love about indie publishing in general is that, camaraderie and everybody kind of working together, so that we all succeed. So thank you for being so willing to share your expertise.
I enjoy it. I'm a former teacher. I wrote my books so kids can learn some new things. And I like to share what I've learned with other authors to help them get their books into schools as well. So it's been a very positive experience for me, the writing and the publishing and the whole ball of wax.
Yeah, well, I have a soft spot for teachers. My mom was a teacher for over 30 years, and she dedicated her life to it, and it's a very noble profession.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
All right. Well, if people listening want to learn more about Independent Book Publishers Association, they can go to our website at ibpa-online.org. We hope you'll become a member. Author publishers, independent publishers get all kinds of helpful information. We have IBPA Publishing University. It's really great. And for this podcast, make sure to subscribe. We drop a new episode the last Thursday of every month. and it's on YouTube, but it's also everywhere you normally get podcasts. Jane, again, thank you so much. Very helpful information. I really appreciate your connection with IBPA, and I look forward to connecting with you in the future as well. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. I've enjoyed my years as a member of IBPA.
Thanks, everyone.